In 1998, Adam Sandler was one of the biggest comedy stars in Hollywood. By 2000, Hollywood had decided he was finished. Little Nicky opened that November to some of the worst reviews of the decade. Critics called it juvenile, lazy, and embarrassing. The film reportedly lost around $30 million. Sandler's previous hits, Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, The Waterboy, were suddenly reframed not as evidence of talent, but as accidents. Lucky breaks that had finally run out. The consensus was clean and simple. Adam Sandler was worthless to serious Hollywood, a novelty act whose audience had grown up and moved on. Hollywood was wrong. And the way it was wrong tells you everything about how the entertainment industry mistakes. Contempt for analysis. To understand what happened to Sandler, you have to understand what Hollywood thought it was looking at in the late 1990s. He came out of Saturday Night Live in 1995 with a specific persona: loud, childish, aggressively stupid, and somehow irresistible to teenage boys across America. Billy Madison made $26 million on a $10 million budget. Happy Gilmore made $41 million. The Waterboy made $185 million, making it one of the biggest comedy hits of its era. Critics hated all of it, every single one. The reviews were not mixed. They were dismissive, almost contemptuous. The consensus among serious film people was that Sandler represented everything wrong with mainstream comedy. Broad, lowbrow, unchallenging. The cinematic equivalent of a sugar rush. What nobody asked was why tens of millions of people kept showing up. That question matters, because the audience was not stupid. They were not being tricked. They were getting something from Sandler's films that the critics, in their contempt, could not see. A specific kind of anarchic, deliberately anti-sophisticated humor that Hollywood had never quite packaged this effectively before. Sandler was not accidentally successful. He was precisely calibrated for an audience that felt condescended to by prestige entertainment. But Hollywood does not analyze what it dismisses. It just dismisses it. That instinct has always been one of the industry's biggest blind spots. Success that doesn't fit the accepted definition is often treated as a mistake instead of something worth understanding. Sandler wasn't succeeding despite his audience. He was succeeding because he understood them better than Hollywood ever did. If you love the stories behind the laughter, subscribe. There are plenty more waiting to be told. So when Little Nicky failed, the industry read it as confirmation of what they already believed. The audience had finally come to their senses. Sandler was done. Studios started passing on his projects. The smart money was moving elsewhere. And then Sandler did something that almost nobody in Hollywood does when the industry turns on them. He stopped asking for their approval. In 2002, he made Punch Drunk Love with Paul Thomas Anderson, one of the most acclaimed directors in American cinema. The film is quiet, strange, and deeply unsettling. Sandler's performance is controlled and devastating, completely unlike anything his critics thought he was capable of. He received universal praise from the same publications that had spent years calling him worthless. He was not nominated for an Oscar. He did not pivot to prestige films. He took the critical validation and walked away from it. Instead, he built Happy Madison Productions into a machine. His own company, his own films, his own rules. The movies were not made for critics, not for awards voters. Made for the exact audience Sandler had always understood. People who wanted to laugh without being lectured, who wanted comedies that felt like they were made by someone who actually liked them. Hollywood looked at this and saw a man retreating into comfortable mediocrity. What they missed was that Sandler was building something the studio system could not touch. By the time Netflix came calling, he had already proven the model. His audience was loyal in a way that transcended reviews entirely. It did not matter what critics said about Grown Ups or Jack and Jill. The people who watched Sandler films watched them because they trusted him. Because he had never once pretended to be something he was, not just to earn the respect of people who would never give it to him anyway. Netflix signed him to a deal worth $250 million. Then they renewed it. Then they renewed it again. And in 2019, Uncut Gems arrived. The Safdie brothers cast Sandler as Howard Ratner, a compulsive gambling addict, a manipulative husband, a man destroying himself in real time. The performance is ferocious, exhausting, and completely without vanity. The same critics who had spent 2 decades calling Sandler worthless now called him one of the best actors of his generation. There was genuine awards buzz. The word snub appeared in dozens of publications when he was not nominated for an Oscar. Sandler's response was characteristically direct. He announced that if he did not win the Oscar he was not nominated for, he would make an even worse movie out of spite. That is not the response of a man who ever needed Hollywood's approval. That is the response of a man who figured out a long time ago that the approval was beside the point. The system that dismissed him spent 20 years waiting for him to fail. He spent 20 years building something that did not require the system to survive. Happy Gilmore 2 arrived in 2025, 30 years after the original. It broke Netflix viewing records in its opening weekend. The same publications that called the first film worthless wrote earnest pieces about what the sequel meant to a generation that had grown up watching it. The audience that Hollywood decided had moved on never moved on. They just waited for Sandler to show up again. The audience never needed critics to tell them what was funny. That kind of loyalty cannot be manufactured by marketing. It has to be earned over decades, one audience at a time. Hollywood kept measuring Sandler by critical approval. His fans kept measuring him by whether he made them laugh. This is what Hollywood consistently misunderstands about the entertainment it dismisses. Contempt is not analysis. The fact that critics do not value something tells you what critics value. It tells you almost nothing about what audiences need. The pattern repeats across his entire career with a consistency that is almost mathematical. Every few years, Hollywood rediscovers that Sandler can act. Reign Over Me, Uncut Gems, Hustle, and every time, the industry acts surprised, as if the evidence had not been there since Punch Drunk Love in 2002. But Sandler never chased the rediscovery. He never structured his career around proving the critics wrong. He structured it around the one thing that had always been true, that somewhere between the childish humor and the deliberately lowbrow comedies, there was a performer who understood exactly what he was doing and exactly who he was doing it for. There is one more number worth considering. In 2020, Forbes estimated Sandler's net worth at $420 million, built almost entirely outside the studio system that dismissed him, built on the audience Hollywood said had moved on, built by a man who never once changed what he was to earn the respect of people who had already decided he wasn't worth respecting. The studios that passed on his projects in 2001 are still making films. Some of them are struggling. None of them have a $250 million Netflix deal anchored by an audience that has been loyal for 30 years. Hollywood decided Adam Sandler was worthless. The math disagreed.